Well, hello, everybody, and thank you very much for coming to the second expert panel webinar. We have some really interesting panelists, and we had some great questions from the webinar last week, so many actually that we couldn't get to them all. But very quickly, if I can, I'd like to just reintroduce our panelists, if I could. We have
Uh-oh.
Okay, that's an interesting. Well, okay, I'm not sure how this is all going to work here, but let me introduce Anthony Patino. Anthony is the Associate Director of Global Health and Safety and Environment at Procter & Gamble. And Anthony leads chemical management, preventative medicine, and regulatory affairs for product supply at, I think we're going to have to start this over again. Okay. Just bear with us a bit, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll see if we can get this sorted. Director of Global Health and Safety and okay. Well, all right. And I don't know, Hunter, if okay, it's it just says keep talking. Okay. I'd next like to introduce John McGilvery. He is the Manager of Safety and Environmental Affairs at the Scott Forge Company. I don't know if I can do this. I'm just going to keep going.
We'll make it through, Larry.
Okay. We'll tell you what. How about I stop and we'll just see if. And I would also like to. I'm going to introduce Ken Tooten, who is the Vice President of Continuous Improvement at Crown America's division at Crown Cork and Seal. Let's see how that works.
All right.
Introduce Ken. Let's see how it goes.
I've got nothing.
Okay. All right. And John, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm John McGillivray. I'm the Director of Safety and Environmental for Scott Forge. I've been in this position for a little over 22 years now, and spending a lot of time on keeping our 3 locations up and operating as one of the key members of our COVID response team.
It got quiet.
Yeah, I can't hear anything that Larry's saying, so.
Tag, do you want to take?
Yeah, I'll step in while Larry's trying to get sorted here. Ed, sorry, do you mind just introducing yourself slightly?
Yeah, no problem. Ed Stevens, I've been with AVB for 13 years now. I've had multiple roles in the business, from manufacturing and to my recent role in the last, since 2014, has been in the health and safety. So I'm currently in a global role in corporate, and my primary focus is on cultural transformation, training and developing leadership competence.
Okay, thank you, sir. Ken, I didn't hear your intro from my side either, so if you can just give us just a 30-second rundown on who you are, that would be great.
Absolutely, Tag. I'll make it simple. My role is a lot like Ed's. We were talking before we actually went live here, and so I'm the Vice President of Continuous Improvement for Crown Cork and Seals North America Division. Been with the company 16 years, been in operations for about 30, and the same sort of bent, right? Safety, leadership, operational excellence, lean manufacturing, implementation, and deployment is my focus, and I'm just doing my level best here in my role to support our plants that are out there on the front line, continuing to make the products that we make that support the food and beverage supply chain.
Fantastic. And Anthony, do you mind me doing the same with you as well, just so we can make sure that everybody knows who we have on the panel?
Glad to do that, Tag. My name is Anthony Panopinzo. I'm with Procter & Gamble. I've been with P&G 27 years. I'm the Associate Director for Health, Safety, and Environment. My focus areas are on preventative medicine, chemical management, regulatory affairs, and during this period, pretty much acting as the public health officer from a product supply standpoint, just trying to keep everyone safe in our 127 supply chain operations.
Wow.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So I just want to start with, Ken, I'll start with a question to you, actually, if I may, just so that everyone who's listening is aware. We were sent a whole sheath of questions, actually, after the first meeting. So what we're going to try and do is we're going to try and address some of those, because it brings up some really interesting subjects tied up with leadership, particularly when people are returning to work. This whole thing about workers, if they've been working in the plants already, then they have an idea of the exposure and all that kind of stuff. But we have new people now coming back, how that changes that dynamic. So I want to talk a little bit. I want to start really about the state of the psychological state, if possible, Ken, with you, the psychological state of people and what you've been doing about that with people either returning to work or the people who've been there currently, how you've been operating that. Would you mind?
Yeah, be glad to weigh in on that, Tech. Thank you very much. And you know, a really quick disclaimer before I get into it. I'm going to talk a little bit about you know, psychological and neuroscientific type content. I am not a neuroscientist. I'm not a psychologist or a doctor. And being on travel restriction, we can't even have access to Holiday Inn Express. So I just put that out there as a precursor. You know, and I'm gonna share some of the stuff that what we're doing. You know, what I can tell you that I am as a person who's spent a lot of time studying this content. And even before COVID, we were starting to, as part of our you know, as Ed said, transformational journey in the organization, we were starting to put some of these concepts in play, and we're finding now that they're even more valuable and prevalent to us. And so, you know, some of the things that we're doing tactically, the question that came out last week is, what are you doing specifically to address psychological safety in the environment, you know, that is COVID, right? So we, you know, one of the things I prepared and bringing to the discussion today is that, you know, for some time now, we've been teaching, don't know if everybody's familiar, but we've been teaching the SCARF model, which is from David Rock's work from the Neuroscience Leadership Institute. He's wrote a series of books on the subject matter. If I can do a little Karl Rove here, I don't know if everybody can see that, but there's the model there on the PowerPoint slide. But it talks about, you know, creating a status, or focusing on status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness for employees, and moving, you know, keeping people, basically managers specifically, engaging employees so that you take them away from a threat response and move them toward the ability to stay grounded and to you know, to really have full access to their prefrontal cortex, their cognitive capability, if you will, right? So what we've been doing specifically, and we were doing this as part of our lean transformational journey, is teaching leaders about those concepts, giving them knowledge, giving them understanding in that space, and then coupling it, as an example. We're doing this now in most of our locations, not all of them, but we're coupling it with you know, a tool that we gleaned from SafeStart a number of years ago now, called the Rate Your State process, right?
Yeah.
And if you look at what a lot of the experts are saying, you know, this idea of getting people out of you know, that constant you know, rumination, that constant zone of worry that everybody is in. How do you do that? What's the best way to go about that? And so, you know, some of the things that are being talked about, and there's many, many articles out there now where companies and lots of people are writing about these types of things. A couple of them that are really good that I've come across lately. One from the Harvard Business Review, 8 ways to manage your team while social distancing, is a great one. And by the way, all of HBR's content right now is free. All COVID-related content on HBR.org is free. There's a ton of it out there. I would encourage people to go in that direction. Another good article that came out that I read recently is 6 ways to combat fear in your organization, which has been published and put on ehstoday.com. What's interesting, all of these, ubiquitous publications are all essentially saying the same things, and they're talking about, we mentioned it earlier, you can't over communicate in this situation. So communication is really key, right? Communicate. Check in, not just with the worker, but with the person, right? Because when you do those things, that's what, at least in our experience, that's when you're starting to apply these SCARF concepts. And then you couple that with a tactical experience of walking people through a rate your state process. And at a minimum, it may not, be a do all to end all. It may not solve the world's problems per se, but it at least gives you confidence as a leader and a manager, especially frontline folks, that you made the appropriate effort to get people grounded in the moment. Because when they're grounded in the moment, they're a lot less likely to be distracted or to make errors or God forbid get into a position where they can become injured. So those are some of the things that we're doing. This communication thing is key because in the absence of real information, what we've learned from a study of neuroscience is that people will fill in those blanks with negativity. We're hardwired for a negativity bias. And the best thing that leaders can do right now in our experience is to model optimistic behavior. Easier said than done for sure, but this is a chance for people who espouse theory-wide leadership to really step forward and make a difference in the lives of the people that come to work every day in these plants.
I just wanted to hear you. Can you hear me all right now, everybody?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, sounds great.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, I don't want to carry on with the next question. Were you just dealing with the potential for the spike in accidents because of
actually, that's
people
where
being
I was
distracted?
Go. That's where I was going to go next, actually, because Ken just said something about, Ken was talking about fear, actually, and that's exactly what I was going to go to, because there's been a lot of conversation from different organizations. Some organizations have said their performance has got better. Others are worried about when people come back, people are going to be distracted and stuff. So I was just wondering if individuals want to comment on that. Anthony, do you want to, or John?
Well, give John a chance at that one, because I know I've talked to him a bit about it before already, and then we can move on to Anthony if you want.
Okay.
John? Yeah. Well, thanks again for having me on the panel. And the biggest issue with that, in our opinion, has been that level of focus. And to Ken's previous point about communication, really, from a leadership point of view, we have the obligation to really break things down into basic fundamental steps that we want our folks to accomplish each and every day, and making it, setting them up to be successful each and every day. So, Ken talked about the communication, and, we've been operating through all of the COVID period. So we've gone full capacity since January of 2020 as this thing spread, and really understanding, our personal model at Scott Forge is a servant leadership model, and it blends very beautifully into this, because we're constantly saying, what can we do to make you successful? What can we do to ease your fears? What can we do in order to be successful, to help you be successful? Because if you're successful, then we as a leader are successful. And that type of model, blended with some of the stuff that Ken talked about, is really important, because the environment that we're working in truly is an environment where it is very, very easy to get distracted, to start worrying about, hey, I heard my neighbor is positive. Hey, I heard my, second cousin is positive. And you start thinking about those things, and you can quickly spiral into that negativity that Ken was speaking of. So we as leaders have to keep it positive, because and especially as people start getting a little bit more freedom, as things start reopening up, they've been cooped up for a while. And again, their focus is going to be on much other things like, hey, what am I doing this weekend? I can do something this weekend. No, you need to be focused on what's at the task at hand so you don't end up getting hurt. And quite frankly, it's equally important on the quality side. The same stuff, the same distraction, the lack of mind on task is going to create quality issues that, 6 months ago, these people would have gotten through that event or that task without a problem. And now we're making simple mistakes. We've got to keep focused. So, call it, going back to a football analogy, blocking and tackling, the basic fundamentals, reinforcing those things. And we're doing that at our shift kickoff boards every day, saying, okay, guys, let's talk about crane safety. Let's talk about, fork truck safety, whatever the case may be, and really keeping them focused on the fundamentals as we continue to go through this process.
Okay. Well, no, thank you, John. That's Anthony. P&G has, I don't know, I think around 175,000 associates around the world. You could maybe fill that in correctly for us, how many countries, whatever. Have you folks noticed an increase in injuries, a decrease in injuries, and just could you comment on it for us?
Yeah, we through all this distraction, we've actually done quite well, and I think again, we've had people focus, much like John has said, at our shift change or daily direction setting. Again, really emphasizing that the first thing we need to do is be safe in our normal routine, be safe in our new routine of the COVID protocols and practices to keep people safe. Really focusing on that aspect and keeping up that cadence of discussion and communication. Again, we have about 127 manufacturing sites, about 75,000 associates in those sites. And other than interruptions in China, they've been practicing these behaviors. So where I'm really transitioning now is how do we maintain that focus, especially as people get fatigued, because we talk about COVID during the day, they go home and hear Dr. Fauci's speech at night or whoever. And so we make sure they're not getting fatigued on the message. And then we have this secondary group of people beginning to get our laboratory associates back in and then bringing more and more staff over the next several months in our ramp-up plan. They're all very new to these behaviors. So it's really like we have a duality of organization and organizational issues. So as an example, yesterday I was filming public service announcements of how to use kitchenettes, make your coffee in a safe way, not cluster while you're eating meals. So just some very simple practices for our research personnel, our office personnel as they come back to work, so they have a face of how to practice those safe distancing and hand hygiene requirements as they come back to work.
Interesting.
Communicate.
Yeah, for sure. Ed, how about you? I think I've got it right, 144,000 associates around the world. So have you folks noticed an increase in injuries and or the opposite, people more focused and less injuries? Oh dear, I can't hear Ed.
Ed?
How about now? I have to turn the mute off. But what I was saying is we're probably real consistent to what Anthony's saying. Not anything that's alarming. Like I was saying before we came on the meeting, everybody's senses are heightened right now. Everybody's really paying a lot of attention to their surroundings, communicating, giving the employees opportunities to express their feelings, their concerns, and creating an environment to where they feel safe, and so that they can not worry about exposure when they're at work and be able to relax a little bit and do what they do best, and that's build our product. So we're just not seeing anything, but my concerns would be coming into the summer as the economy starts to open back up, restaurants starts to open back up, and like John was saying earlier, what am I going to do this weekend? So I've been cooped up, so and we're starting to become accustomed to COVID conversations, and so unfortunately that complacency will start to set in after a while. it's the same old COVID noise that we've been hearing for 2 or 3 months. So coming into this summer could be an issue as people start to relax and the economy starts to open back up and people are moving around more, that their minds are now distracted or on other things moving forward. So we have to really think outside the box to help keep people focused and keep our surroundings and the environment that they're working in safe, and then also continue to keep their families safe as they all start to venture out as the economy starts to open up.
Ed, I think we certainly want to get back to that too, in terms of strategies and things that you folks are doing. Again, there's lots of theory, but you're the ones who have to actually decide. Rubber meets the road. What will we do, and what will we do next week? Tag, if most of the companies that you've talked to, have they been reporting that they've been doing better in terms of, I don't want to call them regular accidents, but I think we know what I'm talking about. Slips and falls, things like that, cuts and contusions, and so on. Has most of the people gotten better? Have most of the companies got a spike in accidents, or just if you could, yeah.
It's one of those things that is always difficult to talk to organizations about, because there's certain things that organizations want to share and they don't want to share. But the general message seems to be that the increased focus on safety from not only a leadership perspective, but supervisory perspective and frontline perspective, has this heightened awareness has actually generally improved safety performance. The worry that a lot of the senior individuals have is that, how do I maintain it? How do we maintain that focus? Exactly to what Ed was talking about now, that, in the next couple of months, people are worried about people getting complacent and going back to what they were doing before. And then that immediate kind of fear or that focus will be lost. And it's how do organizations leverage on that in terms of, continued communication, really.
Okay. Well, there was a number of questions from last week, 30 almost, that came in, and we've already had a few coming in as well today from the audience. So I'll try to throw some of them out there. I get more than one answer, I think, for some of them, but this first one came in. I think it'd be best for you, Anthony, since I know you're not a practicing lawyer, but a PhD in law. So I'll just read the question, if I can, directly. How do you balance HIPAA with contact tracing? Are you violating HIPAA by informing coworkers that they may have been exposed by proximity to somebody, Eric example, who may have been within 6 feet for 10 minutes, 48 hours prior to initial symptoms? And I think just any of the legal issues around testing and contact tracing that you could comment on for us, Anthony.
Absolutely, that's an area that we've wrestled with, and I'll just preface my comments that this does not serve as legal advice. So,
okay,
but we've had lots of discussions, right? with our attorneys, our HR folks, our medical folks. So let me tackle contact tracing really quickly. So again, we approach it with the same sensitivity as we do an injury and illness investigation, any health allegation or incident. Medical is leading those efforts. They may pull in certain people in confidentiality. Certainly, we're limiting the scope of the investigation, really relying on the contact who's developed the disease to give us an idea of contacts, and then naturally investigating natural work teams, and then making very difficult decisions in counsel with our legal group, our HR group, our medical group, as to quarantining select individuals. So I totally agree. I think around the globe, and I know we have some folks from around the globe, you've really got to look at your health data regulations, as well as your personal information data regulations. But you can do contact tracing relatively well in much the same way that we do every incident investigation, without infringing on anybody's, personal rights to medical data. So I think it's step lightly, step cautiously, but I think in some ways we practice this today as health and safety professionals when we do any incident or illness investigation in the workplace. Around testing, we are, working on ramping up testing internal to the company, looking at both PCR and, immunological testing or serology testing, and expect to be able to execute. I have to admit, probably one of the bigger challenges is thinking about all the legal implications of that around the world. And frankly, that's the harder work than getting the labs set up and running. And so we haven't, I don't have an answer for you today. Maybe in a few weeks, I'll be able to give you some more insights about how we're going to approach that. But today, those are still a heavy subject matter for discussion.
Yeah, well, and one of the questions we'll try to wrap up with is how do you see everything, is when the pandemic is over? But I think your comment was really apropos, Anthony, and that is it's changing. It's changing every week. So, we'll what is this week is probably going to change a fair bit by next week, and that'll be one of the reasons for us having another webinar next week is just to get some of those updates. Any from your end around all over the world, any sort of issues that you're worrying about in terms of the testing, the contact tracing, and I'd also just wondering if you could comment maybe a bit on the level of cooperation that you're getting from your employees. My guess would be that it would be high, but that's why I'm asking the question.
Who was that to?
To you, Ed.
Larry, honestly, on that, we have a task force that's put together with that, and that's made up of security and legal and HR. And to Anthony's point, there's some people that are specialized in this field. And unfortunately for me personally, I'm not close enough to those conversations to really tell you what we are doing on a global scale. But what I can comment on is that at all of our facilities, each one of everything is managed case by case, and it's reviewed by legal, by HR, by the task committee, and they get advice, from the CDC, not from them personally, but they take a look at what's being printed, what's put out there, and then we have an opportunity for employees to share their concerns. Either they can share them confidentially through a 1-800 number, or they're highly encouraged to go to HR or go to their supervisors and managers and share their concerns. And we try to filter those questions as best we can with all of our facilities. But to answer the questions at the level that Anthony did, I'm not the right person for that because I'm just not that close to those conversations at this time. Uh-oh.
Larry, we've lost your audio again.
No,
there you go.
Mine not on task. I get caught up listening to the answers and I forget. Yeah, you're on mute. Ken, how about at your folks? I mean, obviously, you're all over. How about the level of cooperation for the employees around things like the testing and the temperatures and stuff like that? Has it been good? People cooperative?
Yeah, I would say it has been, Larry, and I was in some conversations with our medical support folks earlier this week, actually in preparation for this interaction here. And so, yeah, from what I'm hearing from the people who are on the front lines actually dealing with these circumstances firsthand, that, yeah, we're having tremendous cooperation from the people that, have had reason, either positive test results or reason to believe that they may be positive. And in terms of linkage to the contact tracing requirement. Not aware of any situations where we've run into any kind of difficulties that would bring on any legal concern at this point. However, we operate all over the world, just like a lot of people on this call. And, as Anthony said very eloquently, the next couple of weeks are really going to, maybe tell a different story. I'm not sure. But so far to date, we've had no concerns. And, we're fortunate, as I'm sure everybody feels, on this panel to have the kind of employees that we do that are really pulling. You know, we're running factories and have been since day one of this crisis, and they're really pulling together. And you know, can't really say enough just about how inspirational it is to see how our people are responding in general.
Okay, excellent. Okay, and you know, John, I've only been through one of you know, one of your facilities, but the team members there and the culture was amazing. So my guess is that you've had a great deal of cooperation with everybody there. But any I don't know, any golden nuggets you might have that you could pass on to us? Things worked really well that you were like, hey, that was great.
You know, when it comes to contact tracing, it's so important that you've already developed the relationship with your people. Like we are a very family-based organization. We spend more time with each other than we do with our spouses and our kids at home. You know, so we're here 12 hours a day, 10 hours a day, whatever the case may be. And so we recognize what's on the line here, because if we don't do this right, we're taking it home to a family member potentially, and that's the last thing in the world that we want to do. So it's really important that everybody understands why you're doing it. We're here, we're trying to protect the other people in the organization. We're trying to protect their families as well. So we have in the situations that we've had to do contact tracing with, it's gone very well. And you know, for the organizations out there that are just starting to try and get their hands around this, I would strongly encourage you again. CDC guidance is this CDC guidance right here is just absolutely critical to developing a solid plan for that. So you know, implementing safe practices for critical infrastructure workers who may have had exposure to a person with suspected or confirmed COVID-19. And the big part of this, Larry, is this is about stuff that happens inside of work, and this is stuff that happens outside of work too. So if they're living with somebody who is a suspected or presumed positive, they're showing signs and symptoms of the virus, they have to feel comfortable enough with coming forward to you and saying, you know, hey, my kid's running a fever right now. And so now you need to put them into the protocol. And so I would really encourage all the leaders out there to make sure that you really are pushing. This is a 24/7 mentality. You're social distancing outside of work, just like you're social distancing inside of work. You're taking the same hand sanitizing precautions outside of work that you are inside of work. And so this is an all-in effort by the entire organization, because ultimately you want to protect not only your folks, but their families. Because if they're home because their family member is sick, they're equally not at work. It doesn't matter whether they're sick or their family member's sick. You've lost them from the organization.
Yeah, very good. And you know, I mean, I not so much in the Americas, but in Europe a bit. Certainly, there's a great deal of resistance about extending the health and safety influence of the company beyond the company to 24/7. It's changing, but I think this is it's going to really force the issue, because now this isn't a political kind of, it's reality, right? So you have to, you just have to deal with it. Tag, what have you been sort of hearing around all of this from everybody out there? You're on mute, Tag?
I just blotted my copybook. I was doing so well.
Oh dear.
No, on the 24/7 mentality perspective, you know, a lot of organizations, not all organizations, but a lot of organizations are across that. But again, it plays into this piece that Anthony was talking about earlier on, about the fatigue around the message almost, right? That, you know, that we hear about it everywhere that we go with our families and all that kind of stuff. So it's managing that. But again, you know, the thing about taking safety home, sharing skills and things with our families, making sure that everyone's focus is constantly on. Of course, that becomes exhausting for us because we get fatigued when we're thinking about all these exposures and risks that we face. But a lot of organizations are across that. But like I said, not all are quite in that headspace just yet.
Okay. One of I think the most important questions that I just want to make sure that everybody has a bit of a chance to comment on here, and it's how are you dealing with contractors, permanent contractors, temporary contractors, sales supplier people, and what standards, what standards, etc., could you recommend? I think is what the person was asking. Anybody feel like taking a shot at that to start with? I think I think you're up. I think you're up, Ted, or Ken rather, and then John. Yeah, let's go to you after that for sure. So yeah, Ken. Now, how about the contractors? Take on as much as you want there for a few minutes, but permanent, temporary, any however you want to talk.
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of, for instance, a lot of capital installations that were going on in the midst of this COVID outbreak. So, we had to quickly get into a position to make sure that folks that were coming in by necessity or still coming in, obviously are safe and are following the same protocols as our own people. So, early on, and as we continue to do for our own employees, obviously it involves check-ins when they arrive, temperature scanning, all the things you're hearing over and over again, I think, as companies are responding to this. Fortunately, we don't have a lot of temporary contract folks, and really to put it in a nutshell, we've kind of narrowed it down to limiting only essential access. I mean, if people don't need to be in our facilities, they're just not coming in. So I don't know how it's different from what everybody else is doing, but that's been our approach up to this point.
Okay. John, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I mean, Ken hit a lot of the same points I would have said. It's essential visitors only at this time. But if they do need to come in, they are following the same protocols that our folks are following as well. And, to Ken's point, in the facility that I'm at, we have a construction project currently going on. And I'm out there on a regular basis talking to the contractors about social distancing, making sure that in Illinois, where we're at, and as a company policy, anytime you cannot maintain social distancing, you're wearing some form of face covering. And so the challenges are going to be many as the weather heats up, making sure that people are wearing some type of face covering. And so we're looking at face shields. And one of the things that we have found, critical business supplies are being interrupted. Things that you wouldn't necessarily think about. Yes, standard face shields are used in the medical profession, but those are much thinner than an industrial one. But even the thicker industrial ones are starting to become very hard to get. We're finding disruptions in basic supplies like cut-resistant gloves. And we're not sure why in the supply chain that's happening, whether our suppliers are being affected by COVID at a high rate and are shutting down production. But we're starting to be challenged with finding some of the key supplies. And, to Ken's other point is making sure that, again, you're dialoguing with those contractors and making sure that they understand the expectations. And again, it all focuses back to communication. We just want to make sure that everyone in this facility, contractor, guest, employee, they can go home to their families and not take something with them, or they can come to the facility and not broadcast something to everybody else.
Fantastic. The mute thing. Okay, well, thanks very much for that, John. Tag, what are you sort of hearing around this?
It's definitely an emerging theme, right? If you last week we spoke about how what organizations were focusing on had changed over the last sort of 4 to 6 weeks, and we've started hearing more and more organizations look at this, certainly in the last 2 weeks. And again, just to reiterate some of the stuff that's been saying, it's the organizations are thinking of themselves as, because of course they're suppliers to other organizations, so it's that kind of alignment of expectation, alignment of understanding. What do we do with visitors on our site? How do we get that message across to them? It's definitely an area of focus for a huge number of organizations. A lot of struggling with it, frankly.
Yeah, I think so too. Anthony, would like, I know some of the, having been at P&G sites many times, some of the contractor requirements for whatever, I would be a level 1 type of person. I'm not going out and doing any, welding or fabricating or anything risky usually. But I know that for a lot of companies, they want to, when they're working with contractors, they want to see your standards. They want to see that you've got people trained. They want to know that they've been at it, like for basic things in the oil patch, like H2S, BO. There's certain safety standards that they have, and they even want to look at contractors and see the minutes of your safety meetings to see whether they're productive or whether they're just gripe sessions. So we've got an idea of the culture, maybe, of the contracting company we might be working with. I mean, there's a lot to all of that. Are you folks sort of at the stages of trying to get your hands around all of that right now?
Yeah, I mean, we have temporary agency personnel, we've got embedded contractors, we've got construction contractors, we've got concierge contractors that do very specialized work, rigging or something of that nature in our sites. And so we're really looking at, how does COVID change those practices as we ramp up and open back up? Much like the other panelists, we're in a very limited, essential only kind of service type of relationships now with contractors. But as we open up and expand that portfolio, we've got to think about all that. We also, I'm getting to some very diversified discussions about, I'll call them interactions outside of the company, in that we have retail organizations like Tide Dry Cleaners. So we have to think about their interfaces with the population that uses dry cleaning services. We also have, our oral care business. We have personnel that go out to dentist offices to demonstrate new techniques for teeth cleaning and things like that. So, and we also have hairstylists and barbers that go out and teach people how to use our hair care products. So I'm getting into the throes of lots of these contact interactions that I had never thought about before, and each is a very unique discussion. So we're actually hoping to hear today in the state of Ohio, our governor is going to tell us what visiting hair salons will be like in the future, and then we'll build our program for our hairstylists off of those recommendations. And I'm sure they'll be different in every state, which will provide us with some challenges. So it is a big subject matter area that we're turning attention to now, with all the interfaces that we have with, I'll call them unknown contacts, whether they're contractors or other third parties we interface with.
Yeah, I mean, it just the whole fragility of this contact chain is a bit daunting as you start looking. Although I guarantee you, I never would have taken this down to P&G and people training folks on hair. Well, it makes perfect sense. Yeah, of course. Ed, what about at your place? I know you were saying before, bit of an advantage in that you had a bit more, if you will, from the security people that you could tap into because of just their experience. But what about with all of the contractors and you guys are contractors at so many places as well, yeah, too. So you could maybe talk from both sides of that, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah. So, as you know, ABB, like I said, is a global company. We're in 100 different countries. We're over 200 manufacturing facilities. And so we're quite large. And with the essential contractors, some of them we had to reach out and put our arms around and help them develop a plan and a strategy and help them maybe with some of the resources to get them to the level that would be the expectation for them to come into our facilities. And we had to make sure that those contractors were okay with some of the checks and the thermal imaging and the temperature checks and some of the stuff that we would do to allow them to come into our facilities. The other piece of that is if we had somebody that we didn't feel he or she we weren't going to allow access into our facility for whatever the reasons might be, what would be the protocol with their company and with us to manage that. So the big contract organizations, they have resources to come up to speed, put their strategic plan together and do the things that they needed to do to show that they could be safe in our facilities and operate at the same level. But some of the smaller groups, they needed some help. And that's one of the things, to think that everybody's just going to do the same thing as you is crazy. So being a large business, you have a little bit more buying power. You have resources that they might not have access to. So it's important to put your arms around those smaller groups and help them be successful, because the faster the more you help them, the better off they are. And it's almost like safety back, 10 years ago, as the safety culture got elevated to a certain level, not all the suppliers could meet that expectation. So to get a supplier that would have a strong safety performance, sometimes we had to put our arms around them and help them be successful. And COVID's the same way. So that's what we do. As we start to loosen and allow more contractors come into our facilities, then, sometimes we might have to support them to make sure that they have the resources and the ability to do the things that we ask of them before they're allowed to work within our facilities. And then our service group, are out in the customers. And so some of the customers that they're at don't have the same level of requirements that we require. So then it's about really educating the service personnel, giving them the tools and the resources that they need to protect themselves while they're visiting customer sites. And also, it's also communicating to the customers that, hey, if this service person doesn't feel comfortable, then they're not going to do the job, or they're not going to enter the facility. So and then with that being said, then you have to spend time with your supervisors and your managers on how to handle situations like this moving forward. So there's a lot of dynamics to it, and we're all working through these different conversations and challenges and situations, and we're learning as we go.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Look, there's we've got about 10 minutes left, and I want to sort of, if I can, give each of you and Tag a chance to tell us how. The question isn't worded this way, but how do you see the workplace after the pandemic is over? In other words, the new normal. And the sub question to this was, you discussed complacency drift briefly on the last webinar. Would the panelists be comfortable telling us what they are doing at their organizations to prepare for and prevent complacency drift with personal protective equipment, hand washing, etc.? Bit of a mouthful there. And as I said earlier, I would be very uncomfortable trying to say what it's all going to be like when it's over, because I don't even feel I know what it's going to be like tomorrow or next week. So with that qualification, I can't remember, Teg, who's up next. I think it's John, though, or sorry, Ken rather, or John. But Ken, maybe if you can take a shot at that, and then we'll go to John and Anthony and Ed and let Teg wrap it up.
Well, thanks for letting me go first, Larry. I tend to be an optimist around things like this, and rather than focusing on the negative aspects of the impact of an event like this, is what can we learn, what can we carry forward that's going to make us better, right? So, yep. Yeah, I think I said it last week, but there's a lot of habit establishment that's taking place right now in terms of heightened awareness around hygiene, heightened awareness around keeping things clean. And we're fortunate that our plants, the vast majority of them, are following this SQF quality code, right? And if you were to research this code, you'll see in there that certainly focus on personal hygiene and personal hygiene training and policies. It's all a part of that anyway. And I think what we're seeing is where before, when we used to sit people down and train them on that standard, they were like, this is just another thing we have to do that's potentially going to get in our way of the important stuff, which is to make products, right? They're now really understanding, I mean, at a very deep scientific level, exactly what happens with, bacteriological and viral spreads. And I think it's influencing behavior in a positive way. So I think from our perspective, I think we're going to have a much more educated, enlightened workforce. I seem to think, my personal opinion is, we're going to have an easier time, convincing people that following these policies and procedures are in their best interest, as well as the interest of the customer, right? So that's my take on it. I think there's going to be a lot of tremendous learning and a lot of continuous improvement that comes out of this that'll make us all better at what we do.
Well, Ken, that's really interesting, and I mean, I'd like to hope so as well too. In other words, the first change is the most difficult, but you can make a second change with people a little easier than the first one. And we've got the thin edge of the wedge in now, and there's a certain responsibility that people, I think, are naturally shouldering that might make it easier in the future. John, what about at your place? And you and I've talked already about the drift we've seen in our communities, just driving around and so on, and both of us not really feeling too comfortable about all of that. So however you want to address the complacency drift at Scott Forge, John, and what are you doing?
Well, again, going back to what I said earlier, this is an all-in concept. So actually, just this very morning, I'll hold this up. We have, one of our guys, took his safety equipment home and found his daughter putting it on and, coming up to daddy with it. And so, it's obviously something that we've talked about, enough within our family groups, like, hey, this is what I'm doing to keep you all safe. And so, again, that message coming home, which is something that honestly started with our participation with SafeStart. But, Ken's earlier point about the hygiene and, the locker room has never been cleaner. The lunchroom has never been kept cleaner. And, to his point about what are we building on? What did we learn through this process? We've adopted technology solutions like Microsoft Teams to make us more productive. That's not going away after the pandemic and saying, next time we have something like this, we'll pull something like that out. No, I mean, we're going to continue to use that to increase our productivity and our efficiencies. We're also looking at ways of how do we better flex our people and their skill sets, because you don't know who might come out. And looking at that, you've got to really have a cross-trained team so that anyone can step into anyone's role. And so how do you build that training efficiency? So those are some of the things that we're looking at and are working on today to make us better in the future.
You think you'll get the gist of it yet? It's certainly the topic for next week, John, is what, remote, what can we do remotely? What have we learned during this that we would not want to carry on? Like, we can make these changes more efficiently going forward. And we're going to tap in with all of you and what are you actually doing and planning to do in terms of some of the things we've learned, like remote learning and so on, in the next issue or next webinar. But we'll also be dealing with this in the next one as well too, because there's always lots of new stuff coming on. Anthony, I've talked to you offline at length about this because of your experience with all of these pandemics, and I was asking you what you'd seen before in terms of, if you will, the complacency drift and how almost invariably it causes a rebound that doesn't have to happen, but is worth betting on. So what if anything, or what are you guys doing at P&G, and what could maybe some of the folks listening maybe take away with them that might help them in terms of the almost eventual or inevitable complacency drift here over the next month?
And sure, I mean, I think that's a great question. And you know, just building on Ken and John's perspective, I do think there's a lot of positive that comes out of this. And one of the two key messages I've been sending throughout our chain of communication in the company are two things. This is pandemic number 7 for me in 20 of 27 years with Procter & Gamble. Now, some were very limited in scope, regional in scope, but the next one could be better, it could be worse. I mean, the globe is the globe, and we know that airplanes and cruise ships were the main way that this got around the world. And I remind them that in 1394, when the Great Plague started, it took 15 years for the Great Plague to move from China to Europe. It happened in just a few months during this case. So, and I remind people that, you know, presence of our employees is so valuable to the supply chain, really having people in. As John, you know, talked about, you know, the family aspect of work, given that we spend so much time at work together. And it's, you know, we have absence every year during influenza season. Okay, so, you know, when is this over? I said it's not over. What we can do is we can take these same techniques and protocols that we've developed during this pandemic out of crisis, and we can make them the routine so that everybody stays healthier throughout the year. On and on and on. So I think that's the benefit of looking at the bright side of this. Now, as far as getting, you know, out of the complacency, I mean, I think it's just a constant reminder, physical reminders. You know, we're in the building that I'm in, we're establishing islands where we have cohorts separated. We're decorating the place, constant, simple, vigilant reminders that we need to keep our social distancing, stay in our cohorts, wash our hands. And again, I'm actually tired of being videotaped. Yesterday, I filmed 4 public service announcements for our workers, showing them how to wash their hands and make their food in a microwave. But it's well worth it if it sticks with the employees and the folks. And I just hope that we can, you know, maintain that vigilance at work, and also parlay those things that we talk to workers about to their families at home, and maintain those good practices outside of work. Because as John and Ken and others have said, it's a 24/7 effort.
Yep. I think for sure this time, anyhow, you know, whether you like it or not, you've got to accept the 24/7 part. You know, like I said, I've listened to speakers at conferences in Europe really downplaying or poo-pooing the 24/7 aspect of it, and I keep saying, but habits and skills like moving your eyes before you move, that's not something you can turn on and turn off at the workplace. Testing your footing or your grip before you commit your weight to it, it's not something, if you want it to work for you automatically, you got to do it all the time. There isn't any, like, it's the way your brain works. Ed, if you could, we're not out of time, so you don't have to rush or anything like that at all, Ed, but if you could maybe just talk a bit about the drift and the, you know, what we've got people paying attention now and they're cooperating now, but you were I think the one who mentioned earlier in this webinar that you thought the real problem was June coming up, right? And I agree with you totally. So take it away.
Well, I was just making a statement. Hopefully that's not the case, but you know, as the awareness of COVID gets heightened within your family life and what you watch on TV, and then working at the facility and everything's at the highest level, you're paying the ultimate attention to detail, making sure we're communicate, finding out what is bothering employees, what's working well, what's not working so well, and it's just constantly in your face. Well, you can only sustain that for so long, and then your body starts to wear out or get tired or fatigued. And so you have to give the employee a time to decompress. And people have been cooped up for a long time. They're going to work. Our facilities have been up and running for a long time. So they're going to work, and then they're coming home, and they're not really doing much outside of the home other than what they do with their families. Then you got a huge percentage of people that are working from a home office that has never done that before. They're working from a home office. So they're not only are they at home, they're working at home, and then they're at home, and then there's not a lot to do outside of the home. They don't venture out very much. And so you have all of this as the economy starts to open up. You start to see restaurants allowing 25% capacity. You start to see the decks, the outside tables being open to the public, and people are going to start to move around. And then the complacency starts to set in. You start to let your guard down, and so then your senses start to come down. And so what happens is when you get back into the workforce, now your mind might be on other things. Hey, like John was saying, what are we going to do this weekend? I'm going to go spend some time with my parents. I haven't seen them in 3 months. So your mind starts to get put on other things. You start to become relaxed, and then that could be an opportunity for things bad to happen. So we just want to make sure we don't do that. So how do we get in front of the employees and keep their minds on task and doing the things that we do to allow them to start to decompress, to relax a little bit, feel safe, but yet still keep that attention to details moving forward. And that was the whole point I was talking about.
Yeah.
And to do that, we have to do training. We have to think about training a little bit different than what we have in the past 6 months. And so the more opportunities we have to turn the camera on when we're on phone calls, and so that we can see each other face to face, all those little things make a difference moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny, Anthony, I was thinking about you yesterday because I know you and I talked about it. It's despite your bet, like it's not just a complacency drift where you're less motivated. Even if you're motivated, you can still make mistakes because you're not used to it. Like just like we all had to kind of learn how to incorporate the cell phone or a car keys into our routine, so we weren't always losing them. And I found myself, talking with Anthony about this, when the personal systems and habits, it's going to be more difficult than you think. And there I was in the drugstore, and I've got my stuff, but I have to hit the keypad for the PIN on my credit card because it's more than $50 and I can't do the tap. And now I realize I don't have the hand sanitizer on me, and I don't like it. And I'm like, you don't, now you've got to touch the steering wheel, and now you got to remember to go wipe the steering wheel, and I went, oh my goodness, there is like even if you're you're on board, you're like, I'm not careless about this or being cavalier. There's still a lot of, it's just like we're never trying to lose your sunglasses either, but I buy the cheap ones now because they seem to last longer than the expensive ones. I don't know why, but they just don't disappear as quick. So, I think there'll be a lot of that, Anthony. I mean, I was realizing it just yesterday, like that we're all going to have to go get on, like you're going to have to learn how to deal with this, the gloves, the masks, the hand sanitizers. You've got to have, a place for it. You've got to have a system. You've got to have backup because you're going to forget. It's like, I can see a lot of people when they realize what they have to do. It's a bit like SafeStart. They kind of throw their hands up and say, I'm not going to bother. I'm just going to wait for the whole world to get better. I don't want to sound pessimistic about it, but do you guys see the challenge of training your employees in these personal skills and habits to be significant? And I know we don't have time to comment on it now, but we can certainly talk about it next week. But how about each of you? Have you found the same challenge I have? Like just on a personal basis, this is harder than it looks?
It takes constant reminder.
Go ahead, Ed.
Oh, I was going to say that, it's funny you said that because our local movie theater painted a big white huge square on the side of the building, and they started offering drive-through movies. And so basically you could pay for a movie and you show up in your car and you sit in your car and you listen to the radio and you can actually watch the movie on the side of the building like we did back when we were kids, when we went to the drive-thru. And we decided, my wife and I and our son, we decided we'd just go by, get something to eat through a curbside, take that with us, sit in the car, and watch Back to the Future. That was the movie being shown. And when we got to the restaurant, the first thing we do is we start to do the checks. Are they wearing gloves? Do they wear the mask? Do they have the hand sanitizer posted out? There's some regulation put out what curbside should be following during this COVID. And so when we pull up before we order food, we kind of go through the checks to make sure that they're doing the things that we want them to do before we go and purchase food from them. Well, anyway, we started running late from the move to get it to the movie. We ran up and checked that the Texas Roadhouse met all the requirements for us to order food from them. We ordered food from them, and it started taking a little while. And we saw that our food was ready, and the young lady grabbed our food, and she started walking the wrong way from the car. And so I knew that was our food. So I jumped out of the car and I ran up to her and I said, "Hey, ma'am, this is our food." Didn't even think. And she turned around and she backed off from me, and I backed off, and I realized at that moment that I didn't have my mask on. I didn't have my gloves on. I just jumped just because we were running late. And so I go back to the car, get back into the car, and she brings it to the window. And my wife looked at me with those big round eyes like, you do all this work to stay quarantined, and then that one split second you put us all at risk. And I kind of smiled and I said, "Wow, that would make a great SafeStart story."
I was gonna say,
and she's like, "This isn't," and she goes, "This isn't funny." But at that moment, I thought to myself, "Hey, I should share this on the call, because those SafeStart stories matter. And if we could start telling more stories like that and getting that communication out there, where because hazards are different now. Just something as simple as that, not having your eyes or your mind on task, being in a rush. We were rushing, we were running late. All those things played into that one moment for a SafeStart story. And at that same time, that was a great opportunity for me to expose myself and expose my family in a split second. So to answer your point, these SafeStart stories is a great opportunity to start getting people to talk about events like that, that they're experiencing, that's different than what we would traditionally tell a SafeStart story about. I hope that answers your question.
Oh, yeah, it was a great answer, and I always love the stories. But this is what started with me, was that Anthony was telling me about seven of these pandemics, epidemic things, and he's the point guard for a lot of them. So the pressure to not, like, if you've got to get out of the car where the press is all there with the cameras and everything, and then you look over and go, "Oh, great, it would be good if I had gloves and a mask, but I forgot." That's a huge amount of pressure, right? So he was telling me about that. And then the next thing I'm right in the drugstore going, "Oh my God, I'm right here, right now. I'm about to touch something." The same thing that everybody else in this drugstore has had to touch, right? And I don't have anything with me. And it was like, God, Anthony just talked about this yesterday too. So how about you, John? Have you had any SafeStart stories that you could close out with? And Ken and Teg, I know we're a little over, but I'm a sucker for SafeStart stories anytime I get to hear them. So I don't know if John's got one or you've got one, Ken, but
yeah, absolutely. I mean, literally, I went to refill this water bottle right before the panel started. And, I know it's like 2 minutes to airtime, and I'm like, "Oh, got to go get my water." And I got 5 steps out of my door, turned the corner, and there's someone standing there in a mask. And I'm like, "Thank you for the reminder." That person never said a word. I never broke 6 feet of distance, but I was there, and I'm the leader of the band for making sure everybody's in masks and stuff like that. And there I am, because I'm rushing. Yeah. I'm going out into an area where there's multiple people, and I'm like, "Yep, that was not one of my finer moments. And it's going to all the organizations that are still out there that haven't experienced this, you are trying to do very rapid behavior change in a very quick amount of time. And that the only way to accomplish that is everybody recognizing that, you know, hey, we're all going to have our brain fart moments, and we're going to need to pick each other up and help each other be reminded. And just together, we're going to get through this, and together we're going to get better through this. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah, no, I thank you very much, John. But I think, you know, a lot of people do have this perception, and safety too, that if, you know, as long as I decide not to fight it, that's it. That's all I have to do. And that's not the case. There's also the making the mistakes too, like despite being totally on board and not wanting to do anything to increase your risk of contacting COVID or exposing your family to COVID. There I was.
Analyze close calls.
There I was right there going, yeah, I can't believe, you know, that was very quick. How about you, Ken? Have you got a SafeStart story for us that you could close out with?
I mean, I think we certainly all have them. And I was just moving my my youngest daughter into a new apartment last weekend. And of course, you know, you're able to do that, but you have to follow the social distancing protocols, and mask wearing is one of those things. And I've been very, very good about, you know, when you're trying to create a new habit of, you know, decreasing the distance between what you're trying to do and you know, in the habit. So for instance, I've got 3 masks that I keep in my truck so as contingency. So we're doing very, very good going out of the home when we have to go into the grocery store, or because in Pennsylvania, that's now mandated. If you're going into a building, you have to wear a mask. So I can't say that I've had any lapses there, but when I was doing that moving, you know, obviously got distracted, and I was wearing the mask most of the time, moving furniture up and down the hallway. But there was at least one time when I walked outside and I'm like, I don't have my mask on, right? So, you know, I think those things are, it's going to be, as I think what John said is absolutely spot on. You know, we're trying to do something here that is really challenging in terms of new habit formation. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of cognitive effort to get that to sink in. You know, one thing I would offer, you know, we talked about a little bit earlier on the psychological security piece, but, you know, I'm a huge fan of checklists, right? And if you think about, you know, I always refer to, I have a little bit of background in previous life in aviation, and I always refer to the habits of pilots, right? If you're flying commercially, if you've ever seen a pilot, whether they're in the military or a commercial pilot, I mean, without fail, regardless of how many flight hours, they have their checklist out, right? They're walking that bird. They're sitting up there, they're going through those routines. You know, for me personally, you know, I've gotten a lot of use out of carrying these things around in my vehicles, carrying them with me. In the last SafeStart training we had, I told a story about keeping one of these on my bicycle. So when I go out and ride cross country, that I can self-trigger on the types of hazards and potential that's out there. So, you know, I think it's probably going to be something like that. You know, we have to really get used to deliberate behavior around checking in and checking on each other, to John's point, right? We got to help each other, because we're all, as humans, we're inevitably fallible. So we're going to slip up at some point. But Larry, as you're saying, it's, you know, the tracing, the traceability aspects of this can be overwhelming to think about.
Yeah, and I mean, you're already, you know, some people would like, well, okay, 3 masks. They're going, you know, you've already decided that you're not reliable and you have to bet against yourself, you know. And I'm dealing with somebody who hasn't even got their head around the idea that I will carry a mask with me in the first place. So you can sort of see mentally that you've already gone, no, I know myself well enough to know that backup is a good idea, right? Mm-hmm. And we're going to be dealing with people who haven't even quite, you know, got their head around the idea that I will have to accept primary and not backup. Anyhow, Teg, just we're well beyond the hour now, so let me let you close it out in terms of what everybody that you've been talking to has been saying about you know, about the drift and about complacency and the challenge of the employee training over the next couple of months. And we'll certainly come back to that next week, and also talk about what all of you are doing in terms of taking advantage to some of the openings that COVID has provided, like you know, meeting on camera, talking on camera, and not having to get together in person as much, and even remote training and so on. So we'll get to all that next week for sure. But Teg, if you could, maybe just tell us a bit about what you're hearing from the folks out there, their concerns about employee training.
Right. Well, I want to loop back on one other thing too. Ed, you said something that hazards are different now, and that resonates with absolutely everybody. And to the piece about, how do we train people? How do we get people geared up for this? Working on habits. How do we get them to self-trigger and all that? That all plays into that kind of space. And to something that you said earlier on, Larry, as well, it's a tough challenge. As individuals, how do we do it? We catch ourselves making mistakes all the time, and we correct and we get better. But I think a lot of organizations are also feeling that there's actually some sort of weird benefits out of this in terms of the other stuff that we've been talking about in terms of communication, the importance of leadership, retaining focus, the contact tracing piece that was all tied in with communication, the contractors, how we communicate with them, how we partner with them, how we work with them to set our expectations. There's things that we can leverage out of this, because the organizations actually in some ways are getting better and more efficient because of the changes that have been forced upon us. The great problem is that complacency piece. Right. And, so we're teaching these people new habits, we're teaching them new skills, whether we're doing it remotely or in our workplaces. How do we cement those kind of changes to make sure that the improvements that we have been able to see in the way that our operations work, how do we cement them in? Otherwise, to go back to something that Ken said, what do we learn? How do we keep what we've learned to make sure that we're better going forward? That's the challenge that I think that we face going on now.
Yeah, well, I think it wasn't until yesterday that you never really quite get your head around the challenge until you're on the hill yourself. I guess that's what it was. Like all of this stuff made perfect sense to me when you were telling me about it, Anthony, and I was acknowledging that, yeah, I would hate to be the point guard and make a mistake, like having to get out of the car with all the press around and realize you didn't have all your PPE or something. That would be just a lot of, and then the next thing, right away, I make the same mistake the next day, and I'm going, wow. So I think people, even if you're on board, I think the challenge personally for all of us is more than you think right off the bat. I think we're all going to have to put a little more personal effort into this than we might naturally want to, but I think we're also a little more motivated than we would naturally be as well too. So I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic as well that we can take this and make a lot of good out of it. I don't want to start, find a silver lining in anything, and I'm like, well, it's still a really bad thing, obviously, but there are some positives for sure that are coming out of it, and I think a lot of challenges though, in terms of what the new normal will be. So I'd like to thank all of you very much again for your time and for your insight and for being willing to share what you're doing, which is a bit, bit of a risk here and there. And once again, for everybody listening, they're just offering their ideas and hoping that it helps. So take what you'd like, but like Anthony said, this is not legal. This is not legal advice. We're all just doing the very best that we can. Please send your questions in. Larry at SafeStart.com is probably the easiest, and I will compile them all, get them to our panelists. We'll be talking more about the new normal, and if you will, the remote possibility of behavior change, or being able to take advantage of some of the things that COVID has provided us, like distance learning and distance meeting, and the efficiencies that we can take advantage of. So again, thank you all very much. Really appreciate it. And for those of you listening, thanks for bearing with the IT issue and the echo thing at the beginning. That was really quite daunting. Thanks very much, everybody. Okay, see you next week. Bye-bye.
Stay well, everybody.
Well.